Thank you for joining us. I'm Roberta Geithner. I'm the CEO for the YWCA York Access Center and the Victim. We are creating awareness today of the month of October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and in April we'll be doing the same thing to talking about Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Today is about ending domestic violence. 1 in 4 women in our community will be victims of domestic violence. I believe the figure is 1 in 8 men will be victims of domestic violence. So it affects not only women, but men, families, children, our whole community. I thank not only the women that are here today, but the men that are here, because it takes all of us to create a whole different sensitivity to this issue in the community. None of us can be silent bystanders. None of us can let this issue be filled with stigma and shame. All of us need to value our women and our girls so that they are empowered to be everything they can be and are never victims of a bully, of somebody that's going to assault them, somebody that's going to attempt to murder them. I want to introduce Rick Azzaro, who is our Chief Victim Services Officer, for some more details about what it is that we do at the YWCA York and Access Center to address this terrible issue of crime in our community.
Thank you, Roberta. Welcome, everybody. What a beautiful day. To the providers, public officials, law enforcement, and advocates, we welcome and thank you. We thank you for your relentless compassion, advocacy, and energy. You are the voice and the reminder of self-worth and potential. You are the mirror that reveals the face of personal dignity. To those we have lost to domestic violence, we will never forget you. You live on in our hearts, our being, our purpose, and our actions. To the survivors, your strength is our model. Your steps to recovery are inspiration. To the community, I'd like to say, it's time to speak up and stand up. Stop this ferocious, expanding cycle of violence that leaves millions of victims in its wake. It erodes our community, our culture, and our character. So today, let's renew our commitment and take our commitment out to others to act loudly and challenge your county to eliminate domestic violence and aspire to be the best that we can be in our unity, our respect, and our pride. Thank you very much, and I have the privilege and honor of introducing the YWCA's Temple Guard program, who I just quite frankly can't get enough of. They inspire me every time I see them. So without further ado, Temple Guard.
My name is Nicole Lindemeyer. I'm the Community Education Director here at Access and the Victim Assistance Center, the Domestic and Sexual Violence Programs of the YWCA York. I've been in this position only about 4 months now, but prior to here, I was the Public Policy Manager for the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which is a statewide network of all 60 domestic violence programs. And prior to that, I was a civil rights litigator specializing in women's rights and racial justice and anti-oppression work. All in all, I've been working in the field of violence against women for about the last 20 years. But I'm here today to talk in a different role, and that is about my role as a survivor and what I've learned about my own abuse through working in this field. You see, for me, I was, for about the first 20 years of my life, I was beaten and raped more times than I can count. I can't speak for anyone but myself, but I can tell you that my personal experience, combined with decades of professional experience, has given me a few insights that I think are relevant to our work and to honoring Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So give me a few minutes. I'm going to talk about myself. I grew up in a very large, very poor family, and my brothers and my sisters and my mother and I were beaten and tortured and terrorized throughout my childhood. As any abuse survivor can tell you, while the physical violence is brutal, the broken bones, the black eyes, the bloody noses, the swollen body parts, they all take their toll. It's actually the mental and emotional abuse that is far more damaging, and that was my father's specialty. He would do things like line us up in a room with a weapon in his hand and say, one of you's gonna get it, but you have to decide who. Or he would beat and kill our pets and make us watch and then bury their little bodies in the backyard. It was psychological torture. He actually had a one-way intercom system set up in the house so that he could monitor everything we said. And it's no wonder that I was functional mute until I was about 10 years old. When I was 12 years old, one night before I went to bed, my mom was tucking me in and she whispered in my ear that the next morning when I went to school, when I walked to the bus stop, keep walking. Just keep walking and someone will meet up with you. Just trust me, keep walking. So I did. And I kept walking, and pretty soon I met up with my brothers and sisters, and then my mom came up in the car and picked us all up and just started driving. And she drove and drove and drove, I don't know how long, and I don't know where we went. But when we parked, we were rushed into someone's basement, and we lived there for I don't know how long. I know now that we had to go into that basement because there was no shelter space available for all 6 of us, and my mom absolutely insisted that we stay together. When we finally left there and went back to reclaim our lives, there were protection orders and lock changes and safety rules and so much fear. Fear that my father would come back and finish the job, and he tried over and over and over, but we lived. While we had been united under the common enemy of my father while he was with us, when we came back, my family started to fall apart, and so did I. By the time I was 14, I had become a drug addict. By the time I was 15, I dropped out of school and lived on the streets. When I lived on the street, I was raped repeatedly by multiple perpetrators and then became involved with just one man, one very evil man, who controlled me so zealously that I couldn't even get dressed without him telling me what to wear. That abuse went on and on until, after many, many attempts, I broke free. He stalked me for weeks, but I held out and I made it out. By some fluke, I lived through all that. Years later, through nothing but sheer luck and perhaps the tenacity of a cockroach, I found my way to college and threw myself into my education. I graduated with a 4.0 GPA and a double major, and then went on to law school and became a women's rights lawyer. I think a lot and very often about how I made it out, how I kept going and broke free of not just the abuse, but the trauma, the effects that domestic violence has on children exposed to it. In my professional work now, I've researched that issue a lot, and I actually do a lot of speaking on it. And I've come to learn that there's this growing body of research called resilience literature, showing that many children exposed to abuse and other traumas show no greater problems than their non-exposed peers. This resilience literature tells us that as assets in a child's environment increase, the problems that child experiences actually decrease. Those assets are protective factors, and the more they have, the greater the child's resiliency. The most essential protective factor is an enduring relationship with a supportive, caring adult, and for abused kids, most often that's the non-abusive parent. For me, of course, the most important protective factor was my mother. I can say with absolute confidence that my mother saved my life, my brothers and sisters' lives over and over and over, not just by shielding us from vicious attacks by my father, but also just by being there as a warm and loving and stable force in our lives. So that essential protective factor, that bond with the abused parent, was definitely what held me together. Another factor was my brothers and sisters. We were incredibly close, and I know that that's not uncommon for people experiencing trauma collectively. But what's remarkable to me are the other protective factors in my life. It was the kind and caring adults that I knew throughout my childhood. While my father kept us incredibly isolated, we were not allowed to have friends, there were still opportunities for contact, like with teachers at school and the librarian at the little library we went to every week, and the neighbors who just never judged us for being poor, even though they knew what was going on at home. Sometimes it was even just a cashier at the store who would smile as if she knew something and maybe give me a sucker or something. And other times it was watching complete strangers interact in public, like especially men. I would watch them, and men who would be nice to their kids, play with their kids. I would look at them and go, wow, I didn't know. These day-to-day interactions that I saw, they sent loud and lasting messages to that abused kid that I was, that told me that not everyone is abusive. There is another way to be, an alternative way that is nonviolent and respectful. Most importantly, what I learned from even strangers was that I could have hope. So from my perspective as a child who lived through this hell of abuse, and my perspective as a professional working in this field for many years now, that is perhaps the most critical thing I've learned and know absolutely for sure. Every person, everywhere, every one of us has the power to be that hope in a victim's life. Each one of us plays a role in creating a society, a community that cares about each other, that stands in contrast to the violence, the meanness, the oppressive messages of self-hate that we learn from abusers. And it starts with just simply recognizing your role, whether you want it or not, as a model for others. What you say, how you act, all of it is witnessed by other people, by abuse victims and their children. They witness your behavior and it affects them. So take that as a challenge and live up to it. Be the kind of person who is warm and friendly and kind, who models peace and respect in all your interactions with others. So this October, this Domestic Violence Awareness Month, again, I challenge you to think about your role in creating a more loving, nonviolent world. Think about that role and live up to the challenge and be the change that we need to see in this community. We, as abuse victims and as children. Practice respect and compassion with everyone you see, because people like me and people like the scared little kid I used to be, we need your help to counteract the violence in our lives. We need the sense of hope that every one of you can give. We all have a role to play in ending domestic violence, and together, I have no doubt we will. Thank you. We have another great survivor here, and her name is Kayla Crow. She's going to do a musical performance with us. Kayla, please come up.
Hey everybody, my name is Kayla, and I was not, I'm lucky enough to say I was not a victim of abuse from my parents. I honestly can say that I'm so lucky to have the parents that I do. They are so supportive, and both of them are here right now, my mom and dad, and I was actually a victim of bullying when I was in middle school, and I wrote this song, and it's called My Destiny.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Kayla. I really, really admire your strength. We'd like to invite up the York County Commissioners to read a joint proclamation, and a representative from the Mayor's office as well, please. There's a proclamation declaring October Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and they have graciously, as they do every year, supported our work and supported this event. Please come up.
Thank you. And I'm proud to be here today to read this joint proclamation for the City and County of York. And I'm going to read it slowly because there's a lot of good information in here that you need to hear. Domestic Violence Awareness Month, October 2013. Whereas domestic violence is a serious and often deadly crime that has devastating effects on our families and our community. Domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women in the United States, and 1 in 4 women will be the victim of domestic violence at some point in her lifetime. While domestic violence affects people from all racial, ethnic, religious, educational, social, and economic backgrounds, women are 90 to 95% more likely to suffer domestic violence than men. Fewer than 20% of the victims who report an injury from intimate partner violence seek medical treatment following the injury. Domestic violence incidents accounts for the largest category of calls to police each year, yet domestic violence is still one of the most chronically underreported crimes. Only about 20% of those who experience intimate partner violence obtain protection from abuse orders, and 30 to 60% of perpetrators of intimate partner violence also abuse children in the home. Children who witness domestic violence in their homes are 74% more likely to commit criminal assaults as adults. Victims of domestic violence face an array of barriers to breaking free from abusive relationships, including the need for safety, affordable housing, family-sustaining jobs and effective job training, transportation, safe and affordable child care, legal assistance in divorce and custody cases, and the coordinated efforts of police, prosecutors, and judges in prioritizing safety for victims and accountability for perpetrators. It is important that we recognize the dedication and successes of Access York and the Victim Assistance Center programs of the YWCA York and the York County Task Force on Domestic Violence, who are committed to working towards safety and justice for victims and their children. Now, therefore, we, the York City Mayor and the York County Commissioners of Pennsylvania, do hereby proclaim October 2013 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month and encourage all citizens to diligently work towards the elimination of domestic violence. Given this day in York, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, on the 26th day of September in the year of our Lord 2013. And it's signed by the York County Commissioners and the Mayor of the City of York. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
We also have another elected official who is giving some remarks. Please welcome Representative Kevin Schreiber.
All right, I do think we need to give a round of applause to Miss Kayla Crow. It's hard enough to perform in front of an audience, let alone a fire department that's rushing by, so the unpredictability. But she did an excellent job and showed poise, and the show went on. Good afternoon, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here and be part of this event marking October 2013 as Domestic Violence Awareness in York, in our Commonwealth, and in our country. I was actually proud that just this past week at the House of Representatives, I was also formally able to co-sponsor a resolution to hopefully be passed by the House and the Senate, recognizing on behalf of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I want to start by acknowledging the work that's done by the people here today, by the advocates, the counselors, the activists at Access York, and by many of the people and agencies involved in the York County Task Force on Domestic Violence. I want to thank our District Attorney, Kearney, for actually providing me with a very impromptu invitation last week to attend a task force meeting and to meet some of the folks and to see the great work that they're doing and the work that our District Attorney and his staff are participating in as well. Because all of these individuals are the ones on the front lines of domestic violence work. They deserve our community's gratitude and have the utmost respect from us for their work. I'm both humbled and privileged to be with you here today. So thank you all for all of your work. I want to talk about something that I feel very strongly about and is a role that men can play in ending domestic violence. We know that the overwhelming majority of domestic violence is committed by men against women. You heard testimony here today. But it's not the majority of men committing it. Rather, it's a small fraction of men who are the abusers, while the rest of us, well-meaning men, the good guys, think we're doing our part by refraining from abusing women. I'm here to say we men have a lot more to do. It is not enough to simply not put your hands on a woman. If you want to end domestic violence, you absolutely must get involved, personally, actively involved in being part of the solution. In other words, we men have a very critical role to play in helping end domestic violence, and that role requires us to step up and do more. And what can we do? The first thing is we can educate ourselves about domestic violence and its causes. You heard excellent statistics reported by Commissioner Hoke. The root cause of domestic violence is the underlying belief that men are superior to women, and therefore we can do whatever we want to them. And as a husband, I can tell you that my wife is always right, and she is absolutely correct when men are not superior to women. In fact, generally speaking, our wife is far superior. But that belief in male superiority is expressed in so many different forms, not just in physical and sexual violence. It's in sexist jokes. It's in expecting women to do all the cooking, the cleaning, the childcare. It's in belittling things that are feminine through, for example, saying that someone may run like a girl. These are hurtful statements and statements that we sometimes can take casually. But as you heard from Nicole, domestic violence not only impacts the individual, but it impacts their family, their kids, their sisters, their parents. When we educate ourselves, we become more self-aware. When we recognize that even though we may not be abusers, we may still hold attitudes about women that are harmful to them. Then we can work on these attitudes and change our beliefs and behaviors. And that change will help make the world a better, safer, and fairer place for women. The next thing we can do is personally get involved. Once we recognize and change our own beliefs and behaviors, we can start helping men we know do the same. We can commit to speaking out and taking a stand when we see and hear sexist remarks that degrade women or condone violent acts against them. And we can challenge our brothers and our sons and our male friends to do the same. Because when we fail to speak out against it, our silence is affirming it. When we choose not to speak out against domestic and sexual violence, we are supporting it. We must take a stand to speak out and be vocal and visual. The next thing men can do to end domestic violence is to get publicly involved. Women have been working to end domestic violence for decades, but only few men have joined them in that fight. Why? If most of the violence committed against women is by men, then shouldn't we, men, be the ones working to stop it? If you think yes, then please join me in supporting the work of the Battered Women's Movement and Access York, in particular right here in York County. Access is shelters, their counseling centers, their legal and medical advocacy programs. These are the services for women who are survivors of men's violent acts and actions towards them. And these services all provide our male support. And here locally, come to one of the many domestic violence awareness happenings this month in October. The spoken word event on October 4th, the music show on October 18th, the Reach performances on October 25th. Beyond October, continue that support by volunteering with Access or the York County Task Force on Domestic Violence. For as you can see, there are always ways that we can help, but it starts with us, and we have to take the first step in that initiative. Ending domestic violence will not happen overnight. Real solutions are truly long-term solutions. Changes in attitudes, behaviors, and institutions all take time. But we can start now. We can look at how we raise future generations and how we teach our children, by example, that all forms of violence are unacceptable. And that for boys to become men, good, strong men, they need not control or dominate women and girls. Men truly can and must be part of this solution. And I urge all of you to join me in doing so to end domestic violence. Thank you. And just very quickly, in recognition of the great work that both the YWCA and Access York do on behalf of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I would like to present Nicole and Roberta with an award of excellence, because we do know that York County is held up as a model of excellence, but we know that we must strive further. So this is but one modest pat on the back, but as you heard, we can do so much more, so thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate your being here. And speaking to what men can do, I talked a little bit about what I had lived through for the first 20 years of my life. I think it's really, really important to stress. I have two brothers, and they lived through the hell with me. And they were pre-programmed and raised to grow up to be violent, abusive, sexist drunks. To the contrary, they are beautiful, wonderful, feminist, loving fathers and great, great men. It is a choice to use violence. It is never an excuse that you were raised in it, because you make choices as an adult and you can choose to be loving and respectful and kind and nonviolent. So it's really important, exactly what Kevin was talking about. How do we engage men in becoming part of the solution to end men's domestic violence against women? Thank you so much for being here today. We have an entire month of domestic violence awareness events. As Kevin mentioned, one of those events is next weekend. In fact, 3 of those events are next weekend. We have a wonderful spoken word event hosted by Aquina Washington. It will be at the Newgrounds Coffee House. It will be on October 4th. Please join us there. It's going to be a great time. On October 18th, we have a women's music show, also at Newgrounds. And on October 25th, we have a performance of a play performed by teenagers about their lives. It's called Reach, and it'll be held at Asbury Church at 7 o'clock. Those and so many other events are coming up, and we invite you to come out, get involved. It's not just about the violence and the death and the brutality. It's also about celebrating the strength of survivors, and we invite you to join us in celebrating that strength. To close, Roberta Geidner is going to say a few words, and again, I thank you for being here.
Nicole, thank you so much. We've heard such powerful stories. I am just amazed at the courage of this woman to stand up and share that very, very hurtful and powerful story of her loss and survival and the hope that she brings to so many other victims. I want to recognize all of the staff, the 170 people of the YWCA that do the work to empower women and girls, to eliminate racism, to help men and boys become equal and respectful members of our community in terms of the women and girls in their lives. I'd like to also recognize our board of directors. We have several members of our board here. Kayla, what a great job you did as a young survivor of bullying. To the county commissioners, all 3 of whom were here, the mayor, Representative Schreiber, but mainly to each and every one of you who have taken your lunch hour to join us. Domestic Violence Awareness Month is 30 days in October, but domestic violence awareness is 365 days a year, year in, year out, year in, year out. And my hope is, our vision of the YWCA is that at least 20 years from now, and maybe sooner, we no longer have this podium, we no longer have these speeches, because we no longer have this victimization and this crime in our community. So thank you so very much to all of you, but particularly to our staff who provide such help to the community in fighting this crime. Thank you all.